Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it, with a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
This is your regular reminder that unlike the majority of podcasts out there, we don't gatekeep. We want all of our listeners to be able to listen to our shows at the same time as everyone else, regardless of their ability to pay. But if you are in a position to help us out, do head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and sign up for as little as $5 a month to keep us going. We thank you. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the espresso shot to our venti latte midweek show. Hallelujah. 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 I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi. Alex, it's nearly April. Which, the weather needs to get that memo. But obviously we're going to have bloody April Fool's Day and all of the fake news that comes with it. Are you a fan of like a mild April Fool prank? Or I just wonder if that was a different era. Are crazy headlines better when things aren't actually fucking crazy and volatile all the time?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of them are funny. I guess it depends. It's like saying, are you fond of a joke? Well, if it's a good joke and it's funny, yeah, I'm fond of it. I don't like pranks in general, I think. The targeted ones, I mean. They feel very close to bullying. It seems to me.
I agree.
Because the person that is a target of them is not in on the joke. And that always makes me
practical
feel...
jokes are pretty mean.
Yeah, they make me feel quite weird.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of the genre of... Do you remember all of the programs that used to be on TV? God knows if they even still are.
Beatles about and that kind of thing.
Yeah, those candid camera kind of things. And YouTube have loads of them. What shall we dive into topic-wise today, Alex? I was thinking... in the spirit of fake news and April Fool, that maybe we could talk about truth, like who's protecting it, who's threatening it, and whether the institutions we have relied on for most of our lives are still able to defend it.
Plus, in our midweek episode, we discussed the research into party membership trends, but that only looked at what it termed national parties.
That's right, yeah.
We promised that we would have a look at trends for the SNP, the Scottish Greens, Plaid Cymru, and parties in Northern Ireland to even up the scales.
And then maybe if we've got time at the end, I could read you out a few headlines and you can tell me if you think they were a genuine April Fool's story or an actual news story, because there are some quite controversial ones out there.
That's not easy nowadays, but I will give it a try. Right, let's kick things off.
Quiet Riot.
A report this week published by Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee should worry all of us, concluding that Russia's hybrid attacks on Western democracies amount to, in their words, a state of war.
We actually have, at the moment in Europe, two wars going on. We've got the Ukraine war, which has got tanks and drones and so on, but there's another war going on, which is disinformation, where there are countries trying to undermine our democracies, our liberal democracies, and we're sitting there like sitting ducks. I do think we're really complacent. I met up with the German ambassador, and he told me what was going on in Germany in terms of countries trying to interfere in their elections. We started as a committee going around and taking evidence, and it's happening everywhere. And then we saw that these patterns of behaviour are actually things that we recognise as happening in the UK too. I think we think that it's only something that affects Eastern Europe. It doesn't. We need to hold the social media companies to account. We can't just carry on dancing around them. The responsibility does lie with them. If they know that I like green furry shoes, they know when there are bots coming in using disinformation and being used by bots to target information into the UK. I do not believe they don't.
Disinformation, they say, is the weapon of choice for hostile states. It seeps into the cracks of open societies, exploiting our divisions, eroding our shared sense of reality, and leaving us weakened, but from the inside. And their verdict on the government's readiness to deal with it? Not good enough. too fragmented, cautious, and dangerously complacent. Into this context drops the story that feels a bit on the nose. The BBC, one of Britain's most important defences against exactly the kind of information warfare we're talking about, has reportedly appointed a new Director General, and the chosen candidate isn't a journalist or a broadcaster or anyone steeped in public service media. It's Matt Britton, a former senior exec from Google. Journalist Carol Cadwallader, who, let's face it, does know a thing or two about the intersection of tech, power, and democratic decay, has written a blistering piece arguing that Matt Britton is precisely the wrong person at the wrong moment because he's a corporate yes man whose career was spent helping one of the world's most powerful and extractive tech monopolies avoid regulation, and who has cheerfully drunk the Kool-Aid, as she puts it, at a time when AI threatens to gut journalism entirely. But before we get too comfortable blaming Putin, it's worth pausing on something the Foreign Affairs Committee report didn't grapple with. Not all disinformation is a Kremlin operation, or a Tehran one for that matter. A significant chunk of the rage bait and fake news flooding your timeline hasn't been cooked up in a Moscow troll farm, but is just as easily generated by a teenager in Sri Lanka or elsewhere using AI tools, because the platform's creator fund pays out on clicks and shares, and outrage, as we know, clicks better than truth. The algorithms don't care whether your fury was manufactured by a hostile state or a 19-year-old chasing ad revenue. The effect on your sense of reality is broadly the same, which arguably makes the problem harder, not easier, because you can sanction a state actor, but you can't sanction human nature. And right now, the entire economic architecture of social media is pointing directly at it. So, when Parliament is warning that we're already under attack, when the institution charged with telling the truth is being handed to a big tech insider, and when social media algorithms remain opaque black boxes feeding us whatever keeps us most engaged, Alex and I are going to ask, is anyone actually minding the shop? Alex, the Foreign Affairs Committee report says Russia's behaviour already constitutes, quote, a state of war against the West. Do you think the average Brit has any idea that that is the assessment of their own parliament?
Do they know there's been this report? No, but they are aware of this happening. But I think they are aware of it happening peripherally.
Rather than to them?
Yeah, so I don't think if you went and asked someone in the street, they would say, oh, what is disinformation? How does the algorithm serve up fake news? It's a topic of conversation, but there is a really powerful bias at work here because we all want to believe we are more sophisticated and could spot that sort of propaganda. That peripheral knowledge is working against a really powerful background of people knowing it happens, but believing it could not happen to them. And that's exactly like all scams work, right?
Quite. And, even highly intelligent people fall for those.
Especially highly intelligent people, actually, if research is to be believed.
I think people are blissfully unaware. And actually, the committee explicitly calls out ministers and government for having not told us that they have been too cautious and coy and reluctant to declassify examples and say plainly, this is happening, this is what it looks like and why it matters and how you can be alert to it. And I think there is quite a British instinct in Whitehall to keep things quiet and not cause panic. But I guess the problem is that the silence then itself becomes the vulnerability. And if people don't know they're being targeted, they can't defend themselves. And then in the meantime, the disinformation just keeps working. So, Alex, one of the things that they call for is a national counter-disinformation centre that could be modelled a bit on the, like National Cyber Security Centre. A, do you think that's needed? And if so, how would government stop it just becoming another Quango with a logo and LinkedIn page?
The second question is in many ways easier to answer than the first. The way you prevent that from happening is by how you structure it, what powers you give it, who you put in charge, and what the targets are. Like any organization, it's neither doomed to failure nor destined for success by its mere creation. It just depends who you employ and what you ask them to do and how you measure whether they've been effective at it or not. Like any company, any civil society, any organization, anything, whether it is necessary, I guess it is a statement of intent that the government is taking this seriously. And it goes to the question you were asking me before. If part of its job is to make people aware that this is going on and launching it gets a little bit of publicity, it works on an awareness level as well, rather than making it another branch of the Cybersecurity Center or another branch of the Electoral Commission. Its launch in itself becomes a bit newsworthy, and I guess that
raises the salience of the issue with everyone.
If it ends up actually having a mission to assess the trustworthiness, for instance, of news websites, if you can go on the National Counter-Disinformation Center website and pop in the name of a particular newspaper, and it can give you a sort of score of how often that particular organization publishes fake stories, of whether they use AI tools and things like that, then, that can be a very positive contribution.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first job of a government is to keep its people safe. And increasingly, warfare is air war, whether it's drones rather than, soldiers on the ground with a rifle, or whether it is the literal air war of fake news and propaganda flooding into our ears just as we're about to make a democratic moment. So I guess there is an argument that this should be funded out of a defense budget, that this is about protecting liberal democracy and keeping us all safe.
While you were introducing the topic, I actually had a thought that maybe part of why media is restricted to such an extent in places like Russia and China and North Korea is not exclusively to keep accurate information getting to their citizens, but also to prevent other foreign states responding to their own disinformation campaigns in kind, because it doesn't just protect you internally, it protects you externally as well. It makes sure that the British government or the Ukrainian government could not undertake some sort of information campaign to tell people what's really happening on the front line or whatever.
And it was very interesting that when Iran went dark and basically switched off the internet, loads of apparently British bot responses and fake accounts went quiet too. And I half wonder, I mean, with this and the social media ban for young people, etc., I wonder if eventually we're going to end up turning the internet off, and like future generations of humans will talk about the internet era. Like there's this weird kind of 30-year period in human history where they were online.
There is far too much useful, I'm afraid, to do that.
Quiet, Riot. You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win. Quiet, Riot.
Can I switch over to that BBC story? Sure. Carol Cadwallader argues that Britain's entire career at Google was basically about stopping regulation of big tech. What do you think it tells us that the BBC's board chose that CV as a safe pair of hands? Or is it for that reason? Is it that the organization needs someone to help it sort of modernize? What do you think?
I'm sure it does need somebody who has got broader experience than simply traditional programming, journalism, etc. But where I would tend to agree with Carol's blistering, let's face it, assessment of it all, is that it should be an as well as, not an instead of. She claims that the shortlist was down to 4 people, that the other 3 were women who had extensive journalistic experience on their CV, who had commissioned programming, they were familiar with broadcast, and that he was not even in Google's C-suite. She basically says he was effectively a middle manager in charge of EMEA, and therefore a glorified lobbyist and marketeer, and that his job was to keep politicians sweet and stop Google being regulated.
Yeah, and that's actually where I had a slight problem with Carol's piece, in that it seems to effectively suggest, A, that he was a nobody at Google, and also charge him with Google's every crime. So I found myself reading a paragraph and
And going, how
thinking,
can those
okay, so
things
he was a
prove-
nobody, and then reading the next paragraph and thinking, oh, was he in charge of Google's tax policy? The piece is really, really interesting, but it slightly overreaches, I think, with a kind of seething, instinctive dislike of that kind of organization. Because at times, you could address Carol Cadwalader's criticism by appointing someone who was higher up at Google. So, if you appointed someone who used to actually run Google, half of her complaints would fall away. So,
And like the BBC is huge, right? We often talk about that. You almost cannot talk about it as a monolith. It is a series of monoliths, and there are some things it does extremely well, and programming is definitely one of those. We can all and do, I think, have criticism of BBC News, and she really does appear to be looking at it purely from a BBC
news
News
perspective,
appointment lens rather than the broader, how do you reach people where they are, how formats are changing, how consumption trends are changing, and of course,
how do you make it more
so much time-
financially viable, which is
Right,
something
exactly,
on the
exactly.
entertainment side, which is what sells mostly.
And YouTube is owned by Google, and that is where Brits are spending an increasingly enormous amount of time. We have the highest per capita consumption of YouTube of any country in the world. I think, we really are a nation at home. Similarly, there's been new research out about Spotify consumption, and I think the UK is 50% higher than the global average in terms of consumption of content through Spotify. So we are at home, and we are switching away from traditional formats to that. So he's going to bring all of that experience with him. But I think her main thesis is you're hiring the arsonist to run the fire brigade, because at the exact moment when big tech and AI are representing the greatest threat to public service journalism, they've handed the keys to one of the most important public institutions in this country to a guy who comes from that background. And then, she does sort of make, I think, probably quite a valid point that a lot of the coverage has just gone along with it, like oohing and ahhing over him being 6'4" and this amazing rower who had a athletic career is itself
it's a bit
symptom
weird,
of the
isn't it?
problem.
Quite fawning.
Alex, one area where Carol departs from criticising Matt Britton and turns her fire on another media empire and her former employer is where she says that the news organisation should never be, quote, a partner with a company that they're reporting on. And she singles out The Guardian, who have just done a deal with Sam Altman's OpenAI. It's self-mired in quite a bit of controversy because of the war in Iran. Is that a line that has just already been crossed industry-wide? Or is this a bit of a first? And does it matter?
Actually, Britain sits on the board of The Guardian.
Oh, The Guardian, yeah. I don't know if he'll come off that.
Which is quite interesting in itself, and used to be at the Mirror Group before Google. So again, another aspect I had a slight problem is this idea that he's got no connection whatsoever with the media world. So to me, there are a few problems there. The first one is conflating AI as a shorthand for sort of large language models of a particular kind that pilfer content and then spew it back out in a slightly altered format. AI is a huge thing. It includes sort of looking at patterns of cancer cells across millions of patients in order to detect cancer earlier. I am very conscious of this idea that we're having this debate as if all AI is bad, and all AI is not bad. We're talking about LLMs that do a particular thing. They steal content from actual creative people and remonetize it. When I run something through a tool to recognize whether it was generated artificially, if it's a photo or an article, that is also a form of AI. So the truth, I guess, is somewhere in the middle. Let's take the Guardian example. If human critical supervision and checks and balances are in place, if the Guardian basically uses AI to do some of the preliminary grunt work, that is then double-checked via conventional means, then I think suggesting that that is some sort of grand evil in itself is the equivalent of, I don't know, someone saying that going to the library in order to read something in a paper book is somehow better than reading a scanned version of the same book in the library archive. It's just a sort of a form of technophobia. But if it becomes a way of cutting corners and the organization begins to trust what the AI tools are telling it, then it becomes a giant, giant problem, because you have the thing that is meant to check the veracity of stuff being infected by the thing that is altering the veracity of stuff. That's a big
And
problem.
it is so commercial. I mean, the argument, I guess, is what choice do we have? We're hemorrhaging revenue, and these companies have already stolen our content anyway. We might as well get something back from it. And we know from journalists who work at non-Guardian titles who are under immense pressure to churn out maybe 8 articles a day, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of those are to be put on social media, predominantly Meta, like Facebook, Instagram, with highly clickbaity imagery and titles to then get people to click through to a website that has advertising all over it. So, I understand the commercial pressure to do it. I think you're exactly right in your diagnosis that it's how it's going to be done. And I think that's where the Guardian have left themselves kind of exposed to, a hostile piece being written about them by Carol and other people, because, here is the news organization that does some of the most important journalism in the world on tech, on power, on accountability and democracy. And they've taken the money and they haven't said how much, they haven't said what's in the deal. And so that secrecy is worrying people.
As it should. I'm not dismissing Carol's points at all. I think the point she makes is really valid. I just think the bulldozy tone of it, I guess,
Too bombastic,
would make me ask Carol, if she's writing something, when she was writing about Britain, did she look at his Wikipedia page? I suspect yes. Is that some form of betrayal that, she didn't go into the British Library and look in who's who? Time moves on, technology moves on. The question is, how do we use it? The question is, are we taking the time to develop the ethics that go alongside this technology?
Exactly.
The answer to both is no, by the way.
Yeah. The moment your coverage of OpenAI is shaped even subconsciously by the fact that they are now a commercial partner, the thing you have made starts to die.
Yeah.
So I think it's a dangerous move, but with danger can come great opportunity if done in the right way.
The committee also wants social media algorithms to be made transparent to the public. Is that something that is technically meaningful to most people? Would it change anything, do we think?
Oh, it's hard not to get quite cynical with this, because we basically already know what the algorithms do. They reward outrage, they amplify division, they try and addict you so you keep scrolling by making you furious. And that's not a secret. And yet here we are. So I don't know if transparency alone would change behavior, like either the platform's behavior or our own. And I wonder if what might actually work is changing the economic incentives. Like if you're not allowed to micro-target political advertising, if engagement metrics can't be used to juice inflammatory content, if there are legal consequences for algorithmic amplification of very demonstrably false information, then I guess you could start to see change. But I think transparency without consequence might just end up being PR for them.
No, I think you're right. I guess the notion is that there will be enough people who understand it and can spot something dodgy going on and will then make it plainer for people like us and disseminate that information. And that might affect the way the tech companies themselves behave if they know that the code is going to be out there. In the same way that, a company that knows it has to publish salaries thinks differently about what it pays people, for instance, as an example.
And what else they're up to with their other partners. I mean, just look at the Anthropic versus OpenAI argument that happened in the US last month. And where is OpenAI? They're on the side of Trump.
But none of those things are the solution because of the galloping pace of the technology and the economic necessity to believe it is good and to believe it can make a difference, we are completely neglecting the ethical side of how it is used, by whom it is owned. The only way to solve that is to grapple with that, to grapple with the philosophical, ethical issues
Yeah.
at the center of it. And everyone goes, oh, that's boring.
Yeah.
Move fast and break things. Well, okay, you may end up breaking everything. That is the problem with that
Indeed.
attitude. Now, to wrap up the BBC bit of this, I guess, if you were advising the new Director General, what do you think would be the lowest hanging fruit, like the single thing that you would recommend to restore trust in the institution?
Yeah, look, it's about rebuilding the relationship with the audience and being honest about where the BBC has failed. I think the trust problem isn't primarily about being defunded or politically attacked, although they are both very real things. I think it's that a significant chunk of people have concluded the BBC doesn't speak for them or tell them the truth. And some of that is actually just fair criticism. I think the new DG is going to need to be willing to say, here's what we got wrong, here's how we're changing it, here's the deal we're offering you. And I don't think that that is a marketing campaign, and he may find that irresistible being a marketeer, but I think it's with actual journalism, actual accountability, and that's a harder thing to do than announcing a new streaming strategy.
The committee, actually, going back to the report, it does call for the BBC World Service to be funded in a more long-term basis.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're a bit of a regular on the old BBC World Service. I grew up with it because I'm an insomniac, and most of my family are as well. And when Radio 4 switches over to the World Service in the middle of the night, it's a source of comfort. And we talked about it, didn't we, when we had Annalisa Dodds on the show, about the soft power and influence that having a global broadcasting state-funded service like that offers. I'm thinking that if I throw that question back at you, if you were advising the new DG, I reckon you're going to go for something around the World Service, aren't you?
I'm torn. Obviously, the World Service is something that I think would signal, funding the World Service on a long-term basis is something that would send a real signal and quell a lot of the anxieties of people like Carol Cadwallader. But I have to go back to my original suggestion, and we've had so many responses about this. I think that BBC News should move back to a sort of 8 a.m., 1 p.m., 6 p.m., 10 p.m. news. They should lead the way away from the 24-hour, 7-day format, because I think it is at the root of a lot of the problems, a lot of the superficiality, a lot of the inaccuracy, a lot of the lack of preparedness of journalists and interviewers. And I mean, obviously, if something urgent happens, they will do what they used to do since day dot. And now we go to the news because there is this really big thing going on. Having to manufacture the latest big thing going on every hour on the hour, I think has been much to the detriment of their objectivity as a news organization. And I think people are sick of it.
I'm sick of seeing breaking and then it's not a massive deal story that they're actually reporting on. And I'm like, yeah, boy who cried wolfing in my head. And then the next time I see breaking, I think, oh, that'll just be the same shit again. And then actually it's something significant has happened. I would also love them to change that fucking jingle. The beep, 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 beep. It must be 30 years old now. I feel like that was millennium-y coded.
It's quite millennium-y, isn't it? Yeah.
I want to talk to you then about the fact that the report frames disinformation largely as a threat from other states, hostile ones, Russia, China, Iran. But as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of what people actually encounter online is just opportunistic AI-generated clickbait made by an overseas content farm cashing in on platform ad revenue. So do you think there's a danger that focusing on state actors let the platforms off the hook for the more mundane structural rot underneath it?
Yes, I think platforms should take a more active role. So I agree with the sentiment in general. I think we could all be a little bit shrewder in applying our filter to these things. Like, I see friends on Facebook, educated, intelligent people from a news background sometimes even, who should know better, posting stuff on Facebook that they must know is nonsense. But because it fits their current bête noire or their anger about something or whatever, they post it anyway. So I do think there's also some personal responsibility. But at the same time, I do think it's different when some teenager is doing it in Sri Lanka in order to generate clicks. Its only aim is to monetize. It contributes to the environment of people not knowing what to trust, people thinking stuff is real when it's plainly not. At the same time, I think a hostile state actor using disinformation to marshal your population in a particular direction is a different thing. And a completely different order of threat, isn't it? Because they're not doing it randomly. They're not doing it to generate income. They're doing it to lead people to particular conclusions.
Some kid in Sri Lanka generating AI rage bait to pay his rent isn't the same level of villain. He's just a rational actor responding to an incentive that the platform has created. The villain is the incentive structure. And that is a much less satisfying enemy to have.
To wrap it up, are you personally more worried about this than you were, let's say, 5 years ago? And what, if anything, do you actually do different?
Yeah, no, I am in order of magnitude more worried about it than I was even a year ago. And what's changed for me is that it's become much harder to locate the ground. 5 years ago, I felt like I could triangulate, I could read multiple sources, apply critical thinking, and arrive at something roughly true. But now, the sheer volume of synthetic content and how sophisticated it is gets designed to feel so credible that it is genuinely harder. So now I'm finding that I'm consuming less. I'm trying to do it differently, slow down. And when my instinct, when something makes me very, very angry, is actually now to try and pause, because that emotional spike is what the content was designed to do to me. But Alex, I'm not going to pretend I always manage it. I don't think anybody does. What about you?
I'm kind of less worried, than 5 years ago. I think 5 years ago it was this sort of shapeless beast. But I think it's kind of reached its peak, and I find myself better at distinguishing what is real and what is bullshit. I find myself glancing at the AI summary thrown up a lot less because it's so often just nonsense.
Wrong. Completely wrong, yeah.
Go to Google and ask it 5 questions to which you actually know the answer, and I guarantee you will get some nonsense in at least a couple of cases.
So for yourself, you feel personally less worried, but do you extend that to most people?
I don't think I'm atypical in my perception. I don't think I'm a genius. And so I think if I'm beginning to notice the photo that looks really weird or the story that makes very little sense, because why would these two people be in the same room? Other people must also be getting better at doing it. And also I think AI is getting worse at it, obviously because it's consuming its own nonsense as well. I think that the stories and the photos get more obviously fake. And then demographically, we have a population coming into the pool that has grown up with this stuff and must be even better than me at distinguishing what is real and what is not, because it's always been part of their environment.
They are focusing on minor typos, like Boris Johnson being in opposition.
It's not a minor typo, it's a fundamental fact.
It's a minor typo. It's a minor typo.
Matthew, we've got the rules of the debate. I know you like using AI. You've used AI to try and prove that you didn't use AI.
What do you think about the 2.2%? What do you think about the 2.2%?
Where did Anthony Smith, where did that quote from Anthony Smith? James Burnham, Friedrich Hayek. You were so arrogant to say that one of them put it bluntly when he'd never said it.
Do you know, how many books by Anthony Smith have you read?
Well, more than you, seemingly, because you misquoted him in publishing.
Absolutely not.
Anthony Smith, you spoke about peer review. Did this book get peer reviewed? Was it reviewed by anyone at all?
If you really want to know, has this book been peer reviewed by experts?
Sure.
Every single demographic projection in this book was reviewed by some of the world's leading demographers.
Who? Name them. Name them, Matthew. Or do you need to get on ChatGPT to find the world's leading demographers?
I was worried 5 years ago that it would get to a stage where you couldn't tell the real from the fake. And actually, I think in the last year, it's getting further away from that rather than closer to it.
Well, listeners, get your 6 or 7 fingers and scroll down to the show notes where you'll find a link to that Foreign Affairs Committee report and Carol's piece in our show notes.
Quiet, Riot.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
Now, on Thursday, we discussed party membership trends based on a regular piece of research that looks at, and I quote, the 5 big national parties. But what exactly are national parties? Most of them do not put up candidates in Northern Ireland in any meaningful way. The Scottish Greens are a totally separate entity from the Green Party of England and Wales. After the 2015 election, the SNP held 56 seats to the Lib Dems 8. A trend that continued for the next 2 elections. And so it seems to me that national is a little too often shorthand for important to England. So we thought we would try and redress that imbalance. The data we found on party membership is imperfect and patchy, but it is better than nothing. So,
well, Alex, why don't you kick us off with Scotland?
So the Scottish National Party, the latest data I could find was from August 2025, and their membership has continued to decline. It basically reached a peak of about 100,000 in 2019, had fallen to about 72,000 by March 2023, and then quite a big fall to 56,000 by August 2025. And I don't know whether that is because in the middle of that was the big financial investigation that really affected people. Maybe it did. The Scottish Green Party, in the meantime, is reporting a record high of 10,000 members as of March 2026. And that's also been a steady rise. However, if you look at the percentage, membership of political parties as a percentage of their relevant electorate, if that makes sense, Scotland is way above, is about 2.5%. Above the national trend that we were reporting on Thursday of about 2%, right? And something else interesting that I found out doing this research relates to the big picture that we were talking about on Thursday. So 2%, which is a very low number, is still up from a historic low of 0.8% in 2013. So actually party membership is kind of flourishing compared to 10, 12 years ago.
Good old Scotland, getting political.
Yeah, but also all across the UK. That is a trend all across the UK. Like, it's very low, but it's better now than it was 15 years ago. And again, I don't know if big events like the Scottish independence referendum and Brexit have galvanized people to go and join an organization. It would seem instinctively to me that that would make sense. Now, in terms of demographics, there's even less information, unfortunately. We do have some data from 2023 on the SNP. So their members are quite old. 70% of their members are 50 or over, which is a much bigger outlier than the other data we were looking at. And the proportion of young members is relatively low, about 3%. But again, as we were saying, it's about that for in the best case scenario, if you look across the UK. And there is a distinct male dominance. The most recent figures, again, I could find indicate that membership of the SNP is approximately 60 to 40 male to female. And that pattern is consistent with other political parties, again, in Scotland, with the exception of the Greens, which seem to be the party breaking the trend there and coming close to a sort of parity.
It's not getting better yet. In fact, in some ways, I think it's getting worse. I think social media has made it worse and has also made it easier for those who want to be sexist and misogynist towards women in the public eye to have access to them, direct access to them. And I'm speaking for the SNP here, but I'm pretty sure other parties would say the same. It's been really difficult to get women to come forward and stand for election because there is a sense that politics and public life is not a safe space for women anymore. And we need to do something about that, because we're going to rue the day if we continue down this path and women just don't see the ability to come forward and be active in politics. So it's a real problem in politics and in public life, but it's a societal problem.
The only other bit to mention is that about 3/4 of SNP membership are in the ABC1 voter bracket, so quite middle class. Less than 30% are in the working class, and that means, because we saw that trend in the other parties, so they want socially progressive stuff, but they want it to happen very, very gradually. They don't like big change, with the exception, I guess, of independence, which I imagine most people
It's about
joining
as
the
radical as you
SNP,
can get.
subscribe to. You've been looking at your beloved Northern Iron, haven't you?
I have indeed, Alex. Do you want me to give you a wee rundown?
Yeah.
Well, there isn't a huge amount of information, but there is a notable academic that does most of the work that is available. That is Professor Jonathan Tong at the University of Liverpool, and he often gets published in the Journal of Irish Political Studies. If you wanted to go and squirrel away at his work, he has surveyed members of the DUP, Sinn Féin, SDLP, Ulster Unionist Party, and the Alliance Party over the years. And as you would expect, party alignment still correlates very strongly in Northern Ireland with A, religion and community background, and B, age cohort. And I think you can look at those in terms of the pre-Good Friday Agreement generation, if you like, the people who remember the Troubles, and then the post-conflict young millennials and Gen Zs. Younger voters much less likely to be tied to the traditional unionist parties, so UUP and DUP, and are much more open to both Sinn Féin and the more cross-community parties like the Alliance, and to an extent SDLP, very much mirroring what we see in the Conservative Party in the UK. The DUP membership skews older and more male. Its membership base, remember, is rooted in this very evangelical Protestant community. I mean, Ian Paisley, its founding father, set up his own Free Presbyterian Church as part of his political movement, and it is extremely socially conservative and therefore older in profile.
And I think for people in politics in general, but women in particular, face an awful lot of misogyny, and it's not just online. I mean, we talk a lot about what we receive online, but I even this week in preparation for International Women's Day was speaking to my own team of female MLAs, and you see some of the stories that they have told me of their experience of being a female political representative. It is scary. I mean, these are young mothers in some cases who have been accosted by people on the street. They regularly feel the pressure from the online abuse, just trolls and people who think it's fine to attack them with threats, with sexual violence, with physical threats. And it makes a real chilling factor, I think, for women coming forward into politics.
Sinn Féin historically had a younger and more gender-balanced membership. Partly a deliberate strategic choice. The party has been pretty conscious about promoting women into visible roles. It is a pan-island of Ireland party. It's not just a Northern Irish party. And it currently has 2 women leaders, one in Stormont and one in the Dáil. And then the Alliance Party, which, if you like, is a bit more like the Lib Dems, I would say, in terms of Northern Irish politics. It's kind of a bit more on the fence on issues. It doesn't take a view on reunification of Ireland, for instance. Their membership has grown pretty dramatically, and its membership had a huge surge post 2019 that skewed younger and more middle class, more well-educated graduates. And it has now become something of a home for like the younger urban Remain voting professional. And then you've got what would be traditionally described as like the Labour Party in Northern Ireland, the SDLP, who often follow the Labour whip, although they are technically 2 totally different parties. And they've really struggled with membership, and theirs tends to skew older now as well, like many traditional social democratic parties across Europe. And then the UUP, or what is left of it, much more aligned to the Conservative Party than any other, is pretty damned old and stale now. I had a quick look at income breakdowns. They are very hard to find specifically for Northern Irish parties, rarely collected data or published even where a membership survey exists, and it's much better studied in Great Britain because of things like the British election study, which touches on all of that for Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Green, etc. And so I didn't want to leave people without knowing where they could go to look for more information if they're interested. So as I mentioned, the Irish Political Studies Journal, but there's a great website called ARC, Access Research Knowledge, ark.ac.uk, genuinely excellent for all kinds of social and political archive of knowledge about Northern Ireland. So
we'll drop
leave
a link
in the show notes for that.
Yeah.
Quiet Riot. Whether you bond over streaming binge-worthy videos, watching sports recaps, video gaming, or by unplugging altogether, the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus Hybrid helps keep you connected throughout your journey. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Available connectivity features and functionality vary by model. Package pricing, trials, and term lengths vary by model. Video streaming and games are only available while parked.
Quiet Riot. Okay, then finally, Alex, let's head over to our beloved Wales and what's going on with Plaid.
Yeah, so Wales is the real black hole in all this information-wise. There's very, very little around, partly because the traditional big parties, I guess, extend into Wales. And so when research like that is done, it tends to focus on them. And partly because Plaid Cymru does not publish its figures, much like the Labour Party actually doesn't publish its figures. So all I could find out is from a 2022 parliamentary committee. It submitted a paper that estimates Plaid as having around 10K members, about 10,000. We know that they have a much better gender balance in their membership, and actually a much better gender balance in their representation in terms of councillors and members of the Senate than other parties. And obviously, they've also had a couple of women leaders. The representation of ethnic minorities is dreadful. But that, again, just gut feeling, because of the sort of Welsh-speaking communities they represent, I'm not sure that the percentages of ethnic minority people in those communities are unrepresentative, if that makes sense. So that might simply have to do with the balance of demography in the sort of places they represent. It might just be genuinely representative. Their policies are certainly very egalitarian, very pro-racial equality, very pro-LGBTQ+. And so, like I said, I think that is a geographical fluke of where they represent.
And now you've kind of researched Scotland and Wales and heard me talk about Northern Ireland. How do you draw comparisons with what we discussed on Thursday? Do you think there is any fascinating divergence that is significant?
I found the age of SNP members notable. And I don't know if there is something in there, because we have seen the SNP slightly move away from the constitutional question in the last couple of years, and some people within the party are a bit unhappy about that. And certainly we've seen Plaid Cymru move slightly away from that as they're getting closer to the possibility of maybe holding power in the Senate. And I don't know whether the constitutional question has become less pressing now that we are facing a global picture that is so fragmented and so hostile and so fast-moving that it seems the wrong time to be trying to have some massive internal debate. I don't know. We are having someone from the SNP in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, we're trying to get someone on the show, and maybe they can answer that.
Quiet Riot.
Let's go back to disinformation for this final little bit of the show, Alex. The 1st of April is just a couple of days away, and I'm going to test your bullshit-ometer. And I want to know if Alex Andreou can sniff out the prank from the Frank, because he was a bit boastful in topic 1 about how easily he can uncover a bit of fake news.
It isn't only in Britain that spring this year has taken everyone by surprise. Here, in the Ticino, on the borders of Switzerland and Italy, the slopes overlooking Lake Lugano have already burst into flower, at least a fortnight earlier than usual. It's resulted in an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop. The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavour and makes it difficult for him to obtain top prices in world markets. But now these dangers are over, and the spaghetti harvest goes forward.
So I'm going to give you 4 headlines, and I want you to tell me whether you think this was an April Fool headline or a genuine headline.
Okay.
First one.
Do I get to ask any questions? No?
You can ask me one at the end if you want.
Okay, all right.
First one.
Yeah.
Australian police introduce sausage dog squad. The sausage dogs will be used to sniff out crime in ceiling vents and under cars and will be attached to drones and dropped into the backyard of people suspected of criminal activity.
Okay. All right. So wait, do I need to do them one at a time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, you see, I can fully believe that sausage dogs are quite good at sniffing out particular things.
Small and
yeah,
long.
They're small and agile, but the risk to their health in dropping them by drone into the gardens of criminals makes me think that that's an April Fool.
Correct.
Yay!
Number 2. Airport issues 3-minute cap on farewell hugs. Dunedin Airport in New Zealand says that you can only spend 3 minutes saying goodbye to people to improve flow and safety through the airport.
That sounds 100% true.
Correct.
It's a sort
September
of
2024 story,
Yeah.
The maximum hug time 3-minute rule aims to prevent congestion caused by long, emotional goodbyes, directing travellers to the parking lot for an extended farewell.
That's definitely true and very depressing, I think, anyway.
Well, 100% score so far.
Yeah.
Next up, urinating in the swimming pool is a fatal form of chemical warfare.
Oh, God. I think that's true. I think there must be somewhere that a particular chemical was used to clean the water or in the filter that interacts with the ammonia in the wee, and it created some kind of real health problems. So I'm going to go for true.
It is true. Researchers from the China Agricultural University found that when uric acid, which is a compound in urine, and chlorine mixed together, it produces a substance that could cause health problems, namely trichloramine and cyanogen chloride, technically used in chemical warfare. All right, final one. Let's see if we can finally catch you out.
Okay.
Alabama legislature planning to redefine pi as 3 instead of 3.14 to keep it closer to the, quote, biblical value.
It's Alabama. It's got to be true, I'm afraid. I'm going for true.
All right, I finally got you. It's false.
Damn it.
In an issue for New Mexicans for Science and Reason journal in 1998, physicist Mark Bosloff, writing under the pseudonym April Holiday, claimed that Alabama legislature was planning on redefining pi as 3 instead of 3.14 to keep it closer to the biblical value. And there was a large and very outraged response from the scientific community.
Damn it. I thought I had next week's Wokey Dokey in the bag. If math
pi is woke.
Right, so I'm going to come back to you with a couple to see how well you do. And in order to avoid searching for April Fool's headlines, because I thought I'm bound to come across similar ones that you did, and that would be cheating, I searched for Greek ones.
Can confirm, cannot read all right Greek.
Yeah, so
barely speak it.
Your first one. Criminal gang arrested for halving kitchen rolls to sell as toilet paper.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, we know that Greece had a very rough time of it after the old financial crisis, which would lead me to think true. But, I mean, I guess if you halve them horizontally rather than vertically, you probably do have something akin to the shape of a loo roll, but the consistency is pretty rough on the old butthole. I'm going to go with true.
Okay, so it's false.
Okay.
It was an April Fool's one, but because it came at the time when there was actually loads of panic buying of loo roll, ERT, the Greek equivalent of the BBC, took the story on and reported it as
They
fact.
fell for it. They fell for it. Oh,
they
no.
fell for it, and so they actually went on to report it, which I think
All right,
is
don't make me Director General then.
very interesting, considering the conversation we
should
started
ask Matt
with,
Britton
right?
these and see if he gets
Okay,
them.
so
And if
here's
he
your
passes,
second.
he can have the job.
Here's your second one. British tourist wedged between columns after climbing the Parthenon to take photo.
Now, that leads me to think April Fool because they love to poke fun at a British tourist, like sicko Brit, doing stupid thing. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm leaning towards April Fool because, it's kind of funny for people to laugh at Brits abroad. But then Brits abroad can be really fucking dumb. So I'm going to go true.
Okay, so it's false.
Yay!
It's an April Fool, genuine April Fool from 1882.
Amazing.
That caused a bit of a diplomatic incident because the Prime Minister of Greece at the time, Harilaos Trikoupis, believed it and made a statement because the part of the piece was that they were going to have to cut a bit of the Parthenon, basically demolish a bit of the Parthenon to free this British tourist. And he made a statement and loads of people turned up at the Parthenon to protest its destruction. And it created a little bit of a diplomatic incident from a journalist called Babis Aninos, who had actually a tradition of doing really good April Fool's headlines. And so it is an April Fool. But to link it back to our first conversation, when I asked Google whether this had happened, it had a full-on AI paroxysm and not only reported it as true, but brought it to the present day and added detail. Added a name, the man being Nigel Barker Smith from Surrey, and that the Prime Minister was Prime Minister Mitsotakis, invented the detail of it. And when I took the detail of it to search for it on both Greek and English genuine news websites, there was not a sign of it. It had basically absorbed the stories about Mitsotakis and the snub about the Parthenon marbles and that old story with the April Fool's joke fooling the Prime Minister 150 years ago, and created a completely fake story by itself.
And you're not worried about deepfake information.
But the more it does that, the more people will wise up to it, surely. But isn't that a fun one? Both of them, they have relevance to the disinformation angle. So anyway, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Actually, 10 minutes ago was all we had time for. But it's, as always, so wonderful to chat to you. I lose track of time. Now, we've got an Ask Us Anything to prepare for with all our lovely coffee backers this afternoon, right after you listen to this. So listeners, we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you are a coffee backer, then we'll see you shortly at 5 p.m, hopefully armed with loads of probing questions for us.
Indeed, I can't wait. And thank you, Alex, and thank you everybody at home for tuning in. We will be back on Thursday with a very special guest. So if we're not seeing you later today and that has given you some kind of FOMO, then remember you can head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod to ensure you can be at the next one.
But for now, enjoy the rest of your weekend and don't forget to keep on quietly rioting.
We love you lots.
Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.